the Photography Online podcast, in partnership with Kingjoy Tripods.
Coming up in the next hour, we discuss Nikon going to the moon, the closure of a national park due to bad parking, and why the police have seized photos from an exhibition. We then pit our two panelists against each other in the new pop quiz, where knowledge of music certainly won't help you out, before asking, does the world really need a down jacket for a lens or a camera which mimics a flower? Turn the volume up and let's get this show on the go.
And now, please welcome your panelists. A man who, when he found out he had IBIS, asked his doctor for a colonoscopy. It's Nick Hansen.
I'm all clear now.
And a man who credits Ansel Adams as being the main influence in his work. We can't wait for that to kick in. It's Marcus McAdam.
Give it time, give it time.
And here to keep them both in check, a task which deserves a far higher salary, it's Ruth Taylor.
Yeah, too right. Welcome to our February podcast. I am Ruth, your host. This month we've got Nick and Marcus with us in the studio. Welcome, guys. We have finally finished off the last of the festive food over the month of January. The weather has been minging. The days are getting a bit longer though. Have you guys been out and about at all, getting any photographs, or you just been having kind of a chilled January, which I know we quite often do here on Sky?
Yeah, I've gone out a couple of times. Problem has been the icy roads, so I've only been able to get out a couple of times, once on Skye and then in Glencoe.
Oh, wow, okay.
For sunrise, up a small mountain in Glencoe on Saturday.
Very nice. I'm sure you can see all that stuff on Nick's various socials. Mark, have you been getting out at all?
Actually, I have. I've been out with my 8x10 camera because there's a lone tree which is only a couple of miles down the road, which I've had my eye on for a while. And I was waiting for snow. Actually, I was waiting for hoarfrost, which didn't happen, but the snow was a close second. So I made the effort to get out and shoot a couple of sheets of film on that, and I've got them developed and it all looks rather lovely. Very nice. The snow's well gone from where we are right now. I don't know what it's like where you guys are, but we're back to the usual mist and rain. Anyway, that's January. In the news, we're going to start off our podcast this morning with some news stories. Story number one, we're jumping across the pond for this one to the USA. Nick, what's the first story for this morning?
Yeah, so this is to do with photography and filming in the US national parks. So just before Christmas, Joe Biden, the president, signed a law which makes it easier to photograph and film in the national parks in the US. Previously, filmmakers and photographers, they would have to get a permit to shoot within the national parks. Should they be using the footage for commercial purposes, so they're making profit out of it. But now this means that you don't have to basically get those permits. Yeah, I mean, it's not something that we experience over here at all, I don't think. I think all our national parks and what have you are just, you can shoot.
You guys should know you weren't there, Nick.
Being ignorant to the laws.
Yeah, Marcus, you'll know. Any permits required from the National Parks Challenge last year, or did it something you just bypassed?
It's a tricky one, really, because I think if you were going to do a commercial shoot, then you would need permission. But if you're just going there to take photos, I mean, that's the same in the US. If you're just a photographer and you're going to the Grand Canyon, for example, to take photos, then obviously you don't need to have a permit unless you plan to sell those photos for monetary gain. But if they're just for your own personal use, then you don't need to worry about it. But obviously, if you're running workshops in the US national parks, then you're making money from that. So you therefore need a permit. Now, I don't know. Do you know whether that changes things, Nick, in accordance to this agreement?
It says that smaller groups of photographers and filmmakers, I think it's 6 or under.
Like 6, yeah.
They're able to produce content for commercial reasons. So anything more than 6, I guess you wouldn't need to.
Okay, so if you've got a group of 8, then it's actually a group of 6 with a couple of friends. There's always a way around every problem, Ruth.
One thing I do think, this doesn't apply to drone footage because drones are actually not allowed to. You're not allowed to fly. Well, the general public are not allowed to fly drones within the national parks. So
really?
That still stands. Yeah, only people that are involved with the national parks are allowed to fly their drones within the national parks. For marketing purposes, but the general public, are not allowed to, I guess, unless you get the actual permission, and I think you pay for that, jump through loads of hoops and what have you. It's not that easy to get.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing, to be honest, because if that law didn't exist, can you imagine how many drones would be in the air over the Grand Canyon and Arches National Park, people flying drones through Arches. I mean, it would just be a nightmare.
Yeah. And obviously you've got a lot of aircraft in the likes of the Grand Canyon, like you say, as well. And just, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the likelihood of aircraft hitting drone is, but it's, the more and more you get in the air, the more likely it's going to
absolutely.
happen.
Well, it's not unlikely if you've got a lot of drones in the air with aircraft around. So.
And it's also the actual nuisance factor as well. If the more and more you've got bzzz, in the air, it's just, for people that are not interested in drones at all. I mean, obviously we fly drones ourselves, but the more you've got buzzing above your head, it just becomes a nuisance. You're not able to happily enjoy your time in said national park, I suppose. Yeah,
and the other thing, while we're on the subject of drones, I think a lot of people, they don't do anything with the photos or the footage they get anyway. It's just it's more the fun of flying the actual drone around rather than going up to actually get a viewpoint that's unobtainable any other way.
Yeah.
So every time I see somebody flying a drone, I look at it and I just think, what on earth are you recording on that? Because you can tell by the way the drone's moving, they're not doing video. Because if they were, the video would be unusable.
Yeah.
And they're not putting it in a position where you think, well, that can't be an advantageous viewpoint. So what are you doing? And they're just flying it around for the sake of it.
Yeah,
it's pointless.
Just having fun, like a remote control plane. I saw a news story actually a couple of days ago coming out from all the stories we're having in California, which I know we're going to mention a little bit later on. A drone did actually fly in to a firefighting plane, forcing it to land while it was out doing, what it can only do.
I'm sure the drone operator would beg to differ and say that the plane flew into the drone.
I mean, this is serious repercussions for something like that. They're up there. They've been told they're not allowed to be up there. They've been going up anyway, and they've put this firefighting plane out of commission for a certain amount of time. So anyway, that is our first news story. I'm sure it will affect a lot of people listening in the US. So many people heading over to national parks, taking photographs. So you can check out more on that. As ever, those links will be in the show notes. So check those out for yourself. Story number 2, staying over in the USA, because they've got some of the good stories this month. What is it, Marcus?
Yeah, it's all happening stateside, Ruth, this month. So Texas police have seized photographs from a photography exhibition. Have either of you ever heard of a photographer called Sally Mann?
No.
I really like her stuff. Yes, okay. I do.
Well, I'd never heard of her, and Nick had never heard of her, and apparently she's very well known, but not to me and Nick, she's not. But Ruth, you've saved the day there. You proved that she is well known because...
She is well known. I mean, she's one of the first people I remember finding really nice stuff from. She did family photographs.
Yes, okay.
And that's what we're talking about, I think.
Yep. The police have seized a number of photos which were in an exhibition entitled Diaries of Home, which is being held at the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth, after some complaints from people who had presumably seen the photos. Now, the photos were by Sally Mann, who's apparently a well-known family photographer, and Ruth, you've just proved that she's quite well-known because you've heard of her.
She is, I promise.
But she's particularly well-known for her intimate photos of children, and that's what's caused the problem here. So a reporter from the Dallas Express, presumably acting on a tip-off because someone presumably said, I can't believe the photos that are on show at the exhibition. So he went down there and basically accused the museum of promoting child porn. Not something you really want to be accused of, really, is it? So there's a little part which I get confused about, though, because apparently the online newspaper, the Dallas Express, then shared the work, which included a photo of a naked girl jumping on a table and a boy with his genitals exposed with liquid running down his body. So if you're accusing the museum of promoting child porn, don't then print the photos in your on your website, because that's surely just doing exactly the same as what you're accusing the museum of. But anyway, putting that aside, I haven't seen the photos, and I didn't want to Google them because then you probably start popping up on all sorts of databases that you don't want to be part of. So I haven't seen the photos. However, a county judge who has seen the photos, he's got involved, and he said, and I quote, "There are images on display at this museum that are grossly inappropriate at best. They should be taken down immediately and investigated by law enforcement for any and all potential crime violations." So I would imagine that these photos cross a line.
I haven't seen those particular photos. I've seen her work in the past, books online, things like that. I got a funny feeling she shoots in large format, or did. These are old photographs. These are her kids are now grown up. One of them's actually passed away.
So are they of her children?
They're her children.
Okay.
Yes, they're her children. It's like home life. It's not like she's getting kids to pose. Her own kid did pose for her,
right?
And they were very kind of run around. You know, kids are like run around naked and wild and all that stuff.
Okay, because the article that I'm reading that hasn't mentioned that they're her children anywhere. It just says children. So that would lead you to believe that they were just, any children. If they're her children, then I guess it swings it in a slightly different light. However, I want to ask you guys, if Sally Mann were actually a man, do you think the situation would be even worse?
Yes.
I think it would.
It would. Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, she's probably only getting by on exhibiting these photos by the fact that A, she's a mother of the children involved, and B, that she's female. Because I think if she was male, I don't think she'd have a hope in hell. But anyway, my advice to Sally Mann, because apparently doing some research, she's been in trouble by this kind of thing before. So my advice to her would be just stop photographing kids with clothes off.
Surely she's got permission from parents of said children if they are.
No, but she is the parent.
No. I said if the photographs of the children are not her children, then surely she's had the permission from the parents, and they know what her work's going to be.
I don't think that says anything. I mean, someone could ask me for permission to take a photo of my children and then take completely inappropriate photos. That doesn't mean to say that they're doing something right just because I've given them permission.
Okay.
I don't think that really changes anything. What's your verdict?
I mean, different sensitivities. I used to love all her stuff. She's 73 now. These photos are from, I think, the 70s or possibly 80s.
Yeah, and obviously times have changed.
Yeah.
Okay, and there were things that were acceptable in the 1970s and 1980s. I mean, if anyone who is roughly my age and has grown up in the UK, if I said Benny Hill, then we used to have this comedian called Benny Hill, who was actually in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. He was the toy maker in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and he used to do a television show in the late 70s, early 80s, where he would run around kind of slapping scantily clad women on their bottoms with all this laughter over the top, and you'd never be able to get away with that now. But that's what life was like in the 1970s. And I don't think you can judge behaviour or things that have happened back then by modern day standards, because that's just not fair. So if these photos are historical photos taken in the 1970s, I don't think that Sally Mann should be, subject to any kind of, disciplinary actions or anything. But there probably comes a time where you think now is just not the time to be exhibiting those kind of photos.
Yeah, she's been exhibited long enough, decades enough, maybe it's time, like you say, to just pull them. But you can not look at those images in particular, but you can look at the link to the article in the show notes, so check that out. We're going to come back to this country, though. We're heading down to, where are we, Nick? Where's this next story based?
It's the Peak District National Park, so that's kind of central North England.
Now, before you go on, Nick, do you know an amazing fact about the Peak District National Park? Just say no, and then I can explain it to you.
No, I don't, Marcus.
Okay, good, because I'll explain it to you. Whether this is true or not, I don't know, but I read somewhere, and this was a long time ago, that the Peak District National Park was the second most popular national park in the world behind the Grand Canyon.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah, and apparently it's to do with its position in the UK. So when you look at it on a map, you've got the Peak District, and then to the northwest you've got Manchester. To the northeast, you've got Leeds. To the east, you've got Sheffield. To the southwest, you've got Birmingham. So you've got these massive cities all on the periphery of this national park. And then you've got Leicester and Nottingham as well. So you've got millions and millions of people all within a half hour, maybe an hour drive of this national park. And that's why it gets so many visitors.
I would have thought it'd been the Lake District National Park.
Yeah, but think about the Lake District. What's near the Lake District? Nothing.
Well, exactly.
I mean,
but it's
Penrith.
It's the English Riviera, isn't it?
Absolutely, but it takes more effort. So someone from Manchester or Birmingham can wake up in the morning and think, oh, it's a nice day, I'll go and walk the dog, get in the car and go to the Peak District. Whereas there's not that many people who could do that with the Lake District.
True.
The Lake District is kind of somewhere that you tend to go having planned a trip there and maybe stay overnight or stay for multiple nights. But I don't know, it's just a fact. But carry on, sorry to interrupt you.
Well, that fact actually leads us on to, well, the big thing about this story here. So this was on Sunday, January 12th, where two of the kind of the popular roads in the Peak District had to be closed due to inconsiderate parking. So these two roads, Winnet's Pass and Rush Up Edge, which basically lead you to well-known hotspots within the Peak District. The main car parks for these areas, they were closed. The actual Peak District National Park people closed these car parks due to snow and ice. So people visiting the area thought, well, what am I going to do? Well, they're parking down the road, basically. So you've got 2-lane road, people parking either side of this road. So this now becomes a single-lane road without any passing places. It's like a single-track road like we have on Skye. But there's now no passing places because there's roads either side of you. So you're going down the road, cars coming towards you. What are you going to do? You're going to have to
and then someone pulls up behind you and someone pulls up behind the car that's opposite you. And the whole thing becomes gridlocked and there's no way for anybody to move.
Yeah, I mean, so this obviously caused carnage. And it was reported that 200 parked cars were blocking gritters and lorries and also stopping emergency services from getting to emergencies. I mean, there was one, an injured walker near Edale. The emergency services couldn't get through or had trouble getting through to respond to this because of people parking. Well, I think I just call it entitlement. I'm going to this beauty spot. I'm going to park wherever I want just to go here.
Yeah.
Do you think part of the problem is that once they see a few cars doing it, that's it?
Yeah.
I'll go in behind.
That's like sheep.
Whereas if you're on your own, you might think, oh, I better not park here, I might get in trouble. As soon as you got a few doing it, because they were talking in the article about prosecuting some of the people.
Yeah.
There's like 21 people. And I bet those people are decent enough people, and they just saw a line of cars and thought, I'll just pull in behind. Whereas it's the herd mentality, like you say.
Yeah, but exactly, the herd mentality, because people who go to these kind of beauty spots, they're that way inclined anyway because they're only going there because other people go there. So you just think that, me personally, I would avoid that kind of place like the plague, and I would much rather go somewhere else where I'm on my own, I haven't got anybody else getting in my way, I'm not in the way of anybody else, keeping myself out of trouble. I'd much rather do that than go to somewhere that I know is going to be busy. But it happens all the time. Bank holiday weekend comes around, and before you know it, everybody is ramming the same places over and over again. And I just don't understand that mentality. But if that is your mentality, then like you say, Ruth, you're just a sheep and you're just going to follow the person in front. And you think, oh, look, they're parking on the side of the road, I'll do the same.
Yeah.
And if a lot of these visitors are from the surrounding cities, it's not, rural driving, rural parking. It's maybe not something they have the same experience with as perhaps people like us up here.
I think you should need a license to go into the country if you live in the city. Because it's different rules and they just don't get it. I mean, we see it here on the Isle of Skye all the time. People dropping litter, lighting fires and what have you. And you think, okay, in the city, although I still don't think it's right, it doesn't bother me that somebody litters in a city because they have people to go around and clean up. There's no one to clean up in the countryside. And so when you drop litter, it will just stay there forever until somebody else picks it up, of course. But it's just a different set of rules, and I think people from the city, they don't get it.
Yeah.
You should have to pass a basic test.
I mean, and for those who don't, who may not have seen a particular episode of Photography Online last year, Ruth and I went down to the Peak District and we did a light painting session with a local photographer, Stephen Elliott. So we reached out to Stephen about this, and he reiterated how crazy the parking was. And he said that these particular areas were not really that busy before COVID. However, after the restrictions were lifted, it just became ridiculous. And he said he really goes there now. And there are plenty of other spots within the Peak District which are quiet, like you say, Marcus. You just have to know about them.
Yeah, I like your accent. When you say rarely, Nick, it sounds like you're saying really. So he really goes there now, rather than just slightly goes there. He really goes there.
He rarely put my teeth back in. Rarely.
But people have discovered all these locations that, like say, during COVID, during lockdown, they had to stay local. So they discovered them all, and once they're discovered, that's it. It's open. They're not going to be hidden again. So not entirely sure what the solution is there. But
but
it was
it's the same problem over. I mean, we're talking about the Peak District here, but the same problem happens all over the UK and all over the world. Going back to the national parks of the US, I've been in many a national park where it's just so crowded. I just want to get out of there. You can't do what you've gone there to do, which is enjoy the surroundings, because there's just too many people. And so, you just want to turn around, but you can't turn around because there's too much traffic. So.
I'm sure the intention of them closing the car park was to stop people coming into the park rather than just saying, we can't park here, let's park somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that was probably a bit of an own goal, closing the car parks there. That was the root cause of the problem.
Somewhere that is never had a problem, I don't think, with finding room to park. What is this next story, Marcus?
Yeah, so the next story is about Nikon on the moon. The Nikon and NASA have basically signed an agreement where Nikon will provide the Z9 camera for the scheduled Artemis missions, which aim to re-establish a human presence on the moon for the first time since 1972. Now, this collaboration isn't news because I think it was signed about a year ago. But what is new is that Nikon have just released a thermal camera housing, which is specifically designed to protect the camera against the harsh environment of the moon. And there's also a modified grip, which looks like something from the 1960s if you want to go online and Google it. But it's so that you can basically operate the camera with big kind of spacesuit gloves.
I was thinking you've got a camera quite similar looking at your house with the side handle.
Yeah, exactly. So it's got this massive side handle on it with a massive trigger button on the top. But it does look like something from the 1960s rather than something that's come out of a Japanese factory in the last few months. But yeah, the Z9 apparently is already used on the International Space Station, so it's not new to being in space. But this version, which will go to the moon in 2 years' time, will also be modified to withstand the relatively high radiation levels in space. Now, bearing in mind that when the astronauts went to the moon at the end of the 1960s, beginning of the 1970s, they were taking film cameras. If film cameras aren't affected by radiation levels, why would a digital camera be affected by radiation levels? Anyone know that?
No. I mean, I was going to say about the thermal housing as well, obviously, because it's all electronics these days. Back in the day, there was not these electronics, so they didn't have those issues.
No, absolutely. But yeah, so man hasn't been to the moon since 1972. And do you know who the last man on the moon was?
No.
Sting.
No, it was an astronaut called Eugene Cernan, or Gene to his friends. And one of my claims to fame is that I've had dinner with this guy.
Oh, we've heard this story. Do you call him Gene then?
He signed a book for me.
Me and Gene.
He wrote a book called The Last Man on the Moon, and he signed it for me to Marcus. And so it's pride of place on my bookshelf. But I had dinner with him, and I have to say, with the exception of you, Ruth, he has been the best dinner companion I've ever had. Because the stories that he told, some of which were to do with taking a camera and photographing on the moon, just had me completely flabbergasted. And to anybody who denies that people have been to the moon, because there's still plenty of you out there, I would have loved for you to have eavesdropped on this conversation, because the amount of detail that this guy went into and the amount of passion that was in his stories and everything, you just came away thinking there's no way that guy is telling a lie. You can just tell when someone's telling the truth. Yeah, it was fascinating. He sadly died about 7 years ago. But yeah, so he was the last man on the moon. And in 2 years' time, we might be revisiting it with a Nikon instead of a Hasselblad.
Well, let's leave the news stories there for this month. As we said, show notes have got links to everything we've been talking about. Also, all the gear stuff we're going to be talking about a little bit later on in the podcast. So check those out on whatever platform you are listening on. We are going to move on to one of our new features that we introduced in January for 2025.
The Photography Online Podcast Quiz.
If you have got extensive knowledge on pop music, this is what we said last time, it's not going to help you. This is the Pop Quiz. It stands for the Photography Online Podcast. We're going to be playing it every month. I ask the two panelists, that's you guys, some photography-related questions. You can play along, of course, at home as well. We won't be revealing the answers until the end. Nick is looking extremely nervous. He's got his head in his... He's not even started.
I never did well in exams.
Yes, this is photography. This is your niche, Nick. You never know.
I heard what the questions last month, Ruth. I'm not very confident at all.
Well, Nick, as it's your first time, let me just let you know how it works. There will be 5 rounds, so 5 questions. Each one is worth a point for the correct or the closest answer. In the event of a tie, both of you will get the points. See, I'm being generous. The winner gets absolutely nothing. And so, without further ado, let's play.
Round 1. Multiple choice.
All right, so you got a chance, Nick. There's a choice of 4 here. All you need to do is tell me which answer you think is correct to this question. How many cameras were left on the surface of the moon by the Apollo 11 to Apollo 17 missions? Now, come on, this was the most unintended segue ever. A, 4, B, 8, C, 10, D, 12.
So there were 7 missions, was there? 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but Nick, there were 3 astronauts on each mission.
Okay,
so they might have each had a camera each, you know.
I mean, some of them could have taken a camera back. Who even knows?
Well, the thing about that, Ruth, is that they would never have brought anything back that wasn't essential because of the weight. So every bit of weight that you put on a spaceship requires fuel, and you've got to take the fuel all the way from Earth up there. So the whole thing has a knock-on effect.
I think this is Marcus trying to throw me a curveball here.
No, come on, Nick. We had this on the show a year or so ago, a couple of years ago. We had the special where we were talking to the guy who was editing the NASA images. It was mentioned on there. If you watched it, and if you retained the information, and Marcus put it together. So.
I actually edited that feature and I don't know the answer, but I'm having a guess.
Yeah,
okay.
Me too. Right.
Okay, that's question 1. All right, let's move over to...
Round 2. Name the year.
Okay, in this round, the answer to the question is a year. This round will go to whoever gets the closest answer. But if either of you gives me the exact year, which is unlikely, you will get a bonus point. All right, the question is, in what year did AGFA release the first camera to have aperture priority, making a camera that was no longer fully manual?
Ooh.
It's only a closest guess, Nick. So if you get right there, then you're doing great. But
going prior the year of my birth.
No pressure. You're right. You got an answer?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Let's move on to
Round 3. Artificial intelligence.
Okay, so in this round, I asked ChatGPT, or AI, to describe a photographic object, person, or practice without mentioning the name of the subject. All I need you to do, rather, is tell me what I asked it to talk about. Let's have a listen.
Silent, yet precise, it provides the freedom to act without being seen, to control without being present. Its power lies in its subtlety, allowing you to remain at a distance while still influencing what unfolds. It's like a quiet whisper that makes the world shift just the way you want it.
I gotta say, yeah, it's very awfully, it's got like a romantic kind of, I said this last month as well, it's got a slightly creepy romantic edge to it.
Sounds like just your type of guy then, Ruth. Creepy and romantic.
Creepy and romantic. It's not worked so far.
Well, I have no idea how Marcus and James got so close to last month, so I'm just like, well, I think I've got something here, and I think it's in my mind it's pretty good, but we'll see.
Once you get to realise the way AI thinks and how it describes things, it starts to become a little bit easier.
Yeah,
so,
if the day ever comes, Ruth, when I understand AI, then I'm just going to call it quits.
Yeah,
give up.
Fair dues. All right, you got something though, yes? Let's move on to round 4.
Round 4. Take a wild guess.
All right, well, as the name suggests, this round requires an answer which could be almost anything, so you're fairly unlikely to get it exact. You will need to take a wild guess. As with round 2, the point will go to whoever gets the closest answer. Although it's unlikely, if one of you does get the exact answer, there are 2 bonus points.
Now, Ruth, before you ask the question here, last month, I didn't mention this at the time because I thought it might influence the scores, but in actual fact, it wouldn't have done. But James actually did get this absolutely right.
You're right.
And you didn't award him the extra 2 points. But it wouldn't have made any difference. He still would have won, but I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing that he'd beaten me by more than he actually beat me by.
Okay, I'm guessing you're anticipating getting it right, and the fact that you're actually saying that to me. All right, here is the question. Man Ray's iconic print, Le Violon d'Ingresse, sold at auction in 2022, making it the most expensive image ever to be sold. How much was it bought for? Also one that we did on Photography Online a couple of years back.
I mean, I don't remember the exact figure, but I know the ballpark.
Okay. Nick's making a lot of noises and his
I'm going
head is
for
in
a
his
silly
hands.
number here.
What currency are we talking here?
We're talking pounds,
Okay.
please.
Yeah, I put a pound sign.
Yeah.
It's at least £1.
Well, let's move on to our final round.
Round 5. Where in the world?
All right, well, this is as much a geography question as it is a photography one. This got James excited last month, and Nick, I don't know how your geography is. Are you feeling semi-confident here?
Well, what did I think last month was... Because it was the Grand Canyon, wasn't it?
It was the Grand Canyon last month.
Oh, I did have something on my... I forgot what it was, but I thought I had it
right.
nailed, but no, it definitely wasn't.
All right, well, this is a location typically well known as a hotspot for photography. So here is the question. These much photographed islands got their name from a lynx's foot, home to some of the best beaches in the country and a famous surfing competition, yet you can also see polar bears there. Where is it?
So set of islands, did you say?
It is.
What was that about a lynx's foot?
So they got their name from a lynx's foot. That's the derivative of the name of these islands.
Okay. You can see polar bears there. What, a native, not in a zoo, right?
Not in a zoo.
Okay.
No, not in a zoo.
Okay, well, blimey.
Some of the best beaches in the country.
And have you heard of these islands, Ruth?
Now, that might be to give you a clue. Do you think that I know so few places that I've not heard of them? I have heard of them, yes.
Okay.
Am I allowed to go on Google Maps?
You are not, Nick. I swear, if I see you looking like you're looking at anything else, you will be banned from all future quizzes. Okay, you guys got anything?
No.
Nick, Marcus, are you looking at a map?
I'm not looking at a map. I promise
he's
you,
looking very...
I'm looking into space, I'm trying to visualise the map because...
Just trying to find how many Hasselblads there
I'll
were.
tell you what my thought process was when we come to the answer.
Okay.
Do we get a bonus point if we say the country?
You do not. You do not. Right, let's go through the answers. Let me just find the top of this. All right, round 1 was how many cameras were left on the surface of the moon by the Apollo 11 to Apollo 17 missions? Was it 4, 8, 10 or 12? Nick, what was your answer?
I went for C10. I just went down the middle.
Okay.
I went for 4.
Okay. Excellent. Both wrong.
Oh, damn it. It was 8.
That's how we started last month's podcast. Well, it was 12.
Was it?
But as you correctly said, for the weight of the lunar sample rocks they took back. So apparently...
Oh, surely I get a point for that.
No. Neil Armstrong and Edwin, or Buzz, as we know him, as Buzz Aldrin, they began their return and they disposed of anything they didn't need from the lunar module. This included the tube the US flag had been rolled up in, the TV camera they'd used to send footage back to Earth, and the tools that they'd used to gather the moon rock and dust. And in doing this, they actually created what they called a toss zone, which still exists. It lies to the west of the landing site, the Apollo 11. And in the various missions that followed, lots of things were left on the moon, including 96 bags of human waste, a framed family photograph, somebody's ashes were actually flown up there after the Apollo missions, that's there too, golf balls, basically estimated 400,000 pounds worth, as in weight, of stuff is up on the moon there in that toss zone. So there you go. The answer was 12. Neither of you got it. Round 2, the question was all about the year ACPA released their first camera to have aperture priority. What do we reckon, guys? Marcus?
Well, okay, Nick gave me a bit of a lifeline here because he said that he was going for the year of his birth. Okay.
I said just before my year of birth.
Oh, okay. Well, we know that was 1947. Okay, so... But I know when Nick was born, and I reckon it's after that. So I've gone 1 year later, just so that hopefully I get the nearest year. Right, so what have you gone for, Nick?
I went for 1964.
Okay, I thought you were going to say 1972 or something. So I've gone for 1973.
Both wrong. It was 1956.
Damn it.
But closest was Nick, so Nick does get that single point for that question.
That's
it was
amazing.
the Agfa Automatic 66. It was a medium format rangefinder. They actually go now for around about £1,500, but some people have found them in places like charity shops, auction sites for as little as £19. So they are available out there. The first camera that moved on from being fully manual. Round 3 was our AI round, when I asked ChatGPT to describe a particular photographic thing. What did we reckon it was?
I reckon a camera remote control.
I've put down flash.
Nick was right.
Yes!
Oh, damn it.
A shutter release, you are correct. Nick, you're doing really well so far. This is going to restore Nick's confidence in quizzes.
I've yet to get on the scoreboard.
This is true. This is true. Round 4, let's see how we got on with this one. This was a wild guess, so you might be able to get closer to this one. We were asking what the cost was of the most expensive image ever to be sold, Man Ray's iconic print. What did we have as an answer? Go for it, Nick.
I've gone for £100 million.
Okay.
I've gone for 21.2 million.
Ooh, okay. So 12.4 million was the actual answer. Marcus gets closest, so you get a single point for that, Marcus. It was shot in 1924. It was only expected to make between 3 and 5 million. And I don't know if you know this, Marcus, it's actually a composite, this particular image. It shows the back of a woman with an overlay of a picture of the F-holes from a violin on her. Very well-known image. I'm sure you've seen it. If you have Google, you can see it once again. All right, round 5. Where in the world? I described a place, a geography question, asking you if you knew where it was. Do we have a potential answer from either of you?
I did have an answer in the end. Not sure exactly how you pronounce it. It's either Lofoten or Lofoten.
Okay.
Because I think they're a group of islands.
I've gone for the Aleutian Islands.
Okay. Nick was right.
Oh, come on! What do the Norwegians know about surfing?
Well, you get big waves there, don't you? And you're near the Arctic Circle.
Okay, basically, it is in the Arctic Circle, but like the west coast of Scotland, it also has the Gulf Stream. Like we do here, so it does not get as cold as you'd expect. In the summer, they've got amazing beaches up there. They have surfing competitions. One of the islands in the archipelago was originally named Lofot because its shape looks like a lynx's foot, and Lo means lynx, Fot means foot. And so the whole area took its name from that, Lofoten, the Lofoten Islands. It's well known, obviously, I threw you, because most people go to the Lofoten Islands in winter because it's spectacular. But in summer, it actually has a fairly mild climate and looks quite stunning, actually.
So when you accuse me of looking at a map, which I wasn't, what I was doing is I was looking blankly ahead of me, trying to visualise the map, because my thought process was surfing, it's got to be Pacific, because Europeans don't...
You could surf in the Isle of Lewis.
Yeah, I know you can, but surfing is like a Pacific thing, really.
Yeah.
You know, and so I was thinking, it's got to be Pacific, and then the polar bear thing, it's got to be north. So I was thinking, what islands are in the north of the Pacific? And I've got the Aleutian Islands, which are the islands that come down from Alaska and join over to where Russia is. So you get polar bears there, I guess, but I kind of didn't really think about the name of the lynx's foot.
I applaud your geography, kind of what you were doing in your head at the time, because I just cannot do that. But Nick was correct. The Lofotens, very well known by landscape photographers. Let us know how you got on with that. Nick won that 3-1. So congratulations, Nick. Marcus is on what did they say? 0 for 2, something like that.
Well, I came second. That's not too bad.
That's true. That's silver. That's all right. I'll have to get some medals on the go for this. Let us know how you got on. Get in touch. We do have a new email address for the podcast. It's podcast@mc2photography.com. And as we said before, if you've got any questions you reckon would be good for any of these rounds, by all means, do please send them into email, and we will definitely use them next time.
The Photography Online Podcast, in partnership with Kingjoy Tripods.
So we are excited to have Kingjoy helping us make this year's shows possible. As I mentioned last month, we approached Kingjoy because we all use their products. We wanted to have a brand that we could get behind, so we are really happy to have them supporting the podcast. Last month, Marcus explained how the relationship with Kingjoy started after a chance meeting on a hillside with another photographer, which is usually how Marcus meets people. But I know you have been using one, Nick, for a couple of years now. How are you finding it?
It's great. So I use the C86. I previously had the C85, shall we call it the younger brother or sister?
Our sister.
The smallest sibling. What I like about it is its height, for one thing. So I'm not the tallest of people. I'm 5. I always say I'm 5'10" and 5'9.5". When it's fully extended, it's actually taller than me, so that's good when you're on a hillside. And one other thing, a quarter turn of the twist locks and the legs extend so smoothly, unlike some tripods I've had in the past where you've had to like turn it 2, 3 full revolutions, but then you have to yank the section out. Whereas this, just quarter of a turn and it just pops out. So ease of use as well. And I've had this particular tripod for 2 years and it's not gone wrong yet.
All right, well, if you're interested in getting your hands on the same tripod that Nick uses or seeing what else is available in the Kingjoy professional setup, do check out our photography online shop if you are in the UK, or go to kingjoy.com for international sales, or you can find your nearest dealer there. Again, links are in the show notes. All right, well, let's move on.
Listeners from an unlikely location.
Well, this is the part of the podcast where we like to pause and say hi to some of our listeners from some more unlikely locations, shall we say. For the past couple of months, we have been trying to get listeners from every state in the US, but we are continuing to fail. We all seem to be around about 3 or 4 states short, and they are usually different states, annoyingly. However, our most popular state by far for listeners to the podcast is California. Now, as we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, we know that some of you may be having a hard time at the moment, so we just want to send out our best wishes and hope that everybody is safe. And if you lost your property, that the road to recovery isn't too much of a long and winding one. I actually saw a news article recently as well, guys. I don't know if you saw this, about firefighters on the ground who have been rescuing photo albums from people's burning homes. And just in light of what we were talking about last month about how precious real prints are. I know James was talking about this. Marcus, you obviously feel the same way. It seems to confirm how most people feel that in the midst of everything happening, the firefighters, who are not photographers, I'm assuming, that's what they've gone in. They know that's what's precious to people, even without being asked. They've taken those out.
Yeah, well, that's the one thing. I mean, when I've been watching the news, every single person, or maybe that's an exaggeration, but many people who have been interviewed, people who have lost their homes, the one thing that they've mentioned is that they've lost photos. So they're not that bothered about the material things that can be replaced, the furniture, the television, the computer, but the photos presumably can never be replaced. But it's strange, actually, because when we talk about photos, we're talking about prints, and prints are not the original. So prints all would have come from either a negative or a digital file, usually a negative. So as long as the negatives are safe or the digital files are safe, then they can be replaced. But presumably the negatives have gone up in smoke as well.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a couple of there's one particular story, it was online somewhere. Lady was saying, she wasn't going for the bigger items. She actually went for the photographs because it was small. It was probably like a shoebox under the bed or something where, 6x4, 7x5 photographs of, from family or whatever back in the day. And that's what she wanted, those reminders and whatever,
I saw another man who had lost a classic car, some 1950s American thing, and it was just burnt out, just a shell. And that got me thinking, I wonder if there's any kind of really rare cameras that have been lost as a result as well, because obviously they're not made anymore.
No, I'm sure in due time there'll be insurance listings, things like that, letting us know what exactly was lost. But
everyone would have had a Leica.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I did see one person saying, look, if you're in the midst of this and you're being told to evacuate, the best thing you can possibly do is take a mobile phone, stick it on video, and just super quickly go through every room, pull a drawer open, whatever, just because apparently insurance-wise, to prove what you actually had is one of the best things you can do and the simplest and the quickest. But anyway, if you're in California and if you're affected at all, we are thinking of you over here. Moving on to other locations, last month, our most popular non-English speaking country was the Netherlands, closely followed by Switzerland. But this month's listeners from an unlikely location goes to the one person who downloaded the show from Liechtenstein, which is a principality of less people than we have subscribers, let's put it that way, on YouTube. So guten Tag to you, if you're listening from Liechtenstein, whoever you are. Just regarding the podcast last month, Ian Lewis got in touch via email. He says, hi, interesting to hear your New Year's resolutions. Mine is reading. I've never been much of a reader, so I'm trying to make the effort this year, already onto my second book, and I wondered if the PO team had any photography book recommendations. And he said in bracket, not just pictures.
I was going to say,
I can already guess what Marcus is going to say.
Yeah, Mr. Tickle, a classic by Roger Hargreaves.
I take it back. I couldn't have guessed.
Photography
books. Yeah.
No, I'm not a reader. I actually find it really hard work to read. Doesn't matter how interested I am. If I sit down and read it, after about 3 page turns, I'm feeling really fatigued. It's like, you know when you walk into a museum and you can be full of energy, and within 5 minutes of walking through the doors, your eyes feel heavy, your legs feel heavy, and you just want to go and have a lie down somewhere. That's how I feel when I'm reading. And so I don't read books. I would never read a novel, because that's a complete waste of time as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, gee whiz, man. Okay, we need to find Marcus a book that is actually good enough that will get him turning pages on a day when he is not distracted by work, which is not since 1989, I've been told many times.
But I use it to my advantage, Ruth, because when I want to sleep, okay, I will read a book and I'm guaranteed one sentence in and the book's fallen on the floor and I'm out for the count.
Right, fair enough. Marcus is the wrong man to ask. He does have Ansel Adams books on his bookshelf, which is pretty much the only thing I've ever seen him read, to be fair. And we did mention last month the ABC Guide to Photography, which was designed, I think, for children.
Yep.
But he enjoyed that one as well.
One.
Nick, good, Nick. Thanks. Bring the tone back up.
Probably not for Marcus, but maybe for Ian. It's by a photographer called Guy Tal. I don't know if either of you have heard him, landscape photographer, Guy Tal.
I have, actually, yeah.
American. I actually have one of his prints. Long story about that. And it's called More Than the Rock. On the front cover, it says Essays on Art, Creativity, Photography, Nature and Life. So I think it's a lot about, kind of the thought processes and things behind photographs and what have you.
I just saw that name referenced recently. I was getting some text from someone who was writing an article for something, and they mentioned the books that they enjoyed for photography, and Guy Tal was one of the ones that was actually mentioned.
Okay.
That I have lots of photography books, but like Ian said, they are mostly picture books. So I wouldn't recommend any of those to you. But there's loads of good stuff out there. I quite like the fact that so many photographers are actually very, very good at writing as well. And if you're getting a picture book, as we call them, I would recommend, if there's writing in there, don't just skip past it. Don't just look at the pictures, because actually they open up so much more of the books. So there's loads of good stuff out there. And if you guys have got any recommendations for Ian or for any of us, please do put them in, because I'm very, very interested to hear what those are. Michelle got in touch, this again regarding the podcast last month. We were talking about Adobe doing a new reflection removal tool. She said, I've had a reflection removal tool in my Samsung phone for a little while. So far, she said, found it really useful for 2 niche circumstances. First of all, for snaps of things in museums behind glass, where as a random visitor, there's going to be no other options. And it's quite nice having clearer photos if you're going to share them. Secondly, she says she's very lucky to sometimes get a chance to be a passenger in a light aircraft, and the only window is a wee perspex one, a wee curved one. There's a lot of it, and the space is tight, so if an otherwise decent snap has obvious reflections, it is nice to have that option to reduce them quickly. Anthony in Canada also saying it might help amateur ice hockey shooters. I think a lot of them over in Canada, 90% of images are shot from behind glass for that. So thanks for those guys. Regarding the Photography Online show, a little bit more diverse comments, shall we say, the last show. This is from Oxed Greep. I'm guessing that's not his real name. Great production quality. Shame they forgot the brains. This may or may not be referring to the Micro Four Thirds. It wasn't a Micro Four Thirds feature. It was a feature on sensor size, which apparently, and completely, took me by surprise, put the cat among the pigeons. We've heard from quite a few upset Micro Four Thirds users. You would think we had, insulted
yeah, what was the name of that guy who said no brains? I bet it's not a name, is it?
It's not a real name. It's all one word.
No, it never is. Trolls never have their own name. It is always some kind of secret code.
Secret code name. Well, Francis put his own name. This is Francis Oakland. He said, such a shame to reduce the episode to Micro Four Thirds bashing. Someone else said, what you showed was a 4/3 10 megapixel DSLR camera from almost 2 decades ago. I expect more from a photo site, especially when comparing sensors in 2025. That is from Fierce Sleeping Dog. Yeah. Paul Hoffman, though, said in Harry's sensor comparison, he briefly mentioned there are fewer lenses available for the APS-C cameras. If you go to Canon, their full-frame lenses will fit an APS-C camera without adapters, and so that expands the available range. That's from Paul Hoffman.
Okay, so let me address that, because when Harry mentioned that there was less available lenses, what he meant was there's less focal lengths available, because Paul is correct in that if you've got an APS-C camera, you can normally put full frame lenses on it, so therefore you're essentially expanding the range of lenses that you can use. However, at the wide end, obviously you're applying a crop factor, so a 14mm wide angle lens for a full frame camera, if you put it on an APS-C camera, it's only 20mm, so you can't really go any wider than that, and that's the problem. It's like you're limited with focal range. So that was the point that Harry was trying to make. Even though he probably said it like that because he wasn't reading off a script, but that's what he meant. He didn't mean that there was physically less lenses. He meant there's less focal lengths available to you.
I mean, I personally thought that was quite a balanced feature, but I was taken aback by the amount of
micro
offense.
Four Thirds, but they do seem to be a very sensitive bunch. And for the comment you read out there about us using a 4/3 sensor instead of a micro 4/3, they're the same size. The feature was about sensor sizes, okay? So we've used a camera with the same size sensor. What's the problem? It's not, if we'd used a micro 4/3 camera, it would have been exactly the same size, so it wouldn't have changed the outcome of the result at all.
Maybe they don't get featured enough and they were excited to have...
Put the full stop a little bit earlier in that sentence, Ruth. They just don't get it.
Right, this is a sweeping statement. He's not trying to re-offend people, but obviously some people taking the hump. Anyway, it's an educational feature, shall we say?
It was supposed to be an educational feature, and then
it was supposed to be. This is the prize, yeah.
And this is the problem. And the people turned it into a saying, "Why didn't you mention about the IBIS? And why didn't you mention about this?" And that's not what we were doing. We weren't comparing the features of a camera. It wasn't the features of Olympus versus a Canon or the Nikon. We were talking about sensor sizes. It's irrelevant what camera it is. So all cameras have IBIS. All cameras have all the other features. And they might be better on Olympus than they are on Sony, for example. Who cares? Doesn't matter. We were talking about the size of the sensor. That was it. We weren't talking about features or anything like that. Otherwise, we would have spoken about features. So a lot of people, they misinterpreted the whole point of the feature.
All right. Well, one final comment on the show, on the Photography Online show, was about your segment, Analog Affairs. You were talking about coloured filters for black and white. Bill said it would have been helpful to include more filters in the colour filter segment. A green or blue would have really shown a dramatic difference. This is from a Bill Green. So maybe he's just taken offence that his own.
Well, the thing is, if I'd used a green and a blue filter, then someone would have said, well, you should have used a pink and a cyan.
Yes.
I mean, where'd you draw the line? You can't just keep going. I used 3.
Exactly.
Okay, surely that's enough to illustrate a point. And he's wrong about it would have been more, would have created a bigger difference if you used a blue and a green. It would have created exactly the same difference, but just in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So he's wrong about that.
We can't do absolutely everything under the sun. It was educational. And again, check that out if you want to. Poor Marcus. I think we need to put him on hiatus from having to read comments for a little while. It takes a lot out of you to put all this effort into the show, then to get it out, and then just to get all these people taking the hump.
There's plenty of positive comments as well, but there's no point. There's no point in reading out all the positive comments with everybody saying, "Oh, I loved it. This is great." It's more fun to read out the negative ones.
There are a few in there. Yeah, we always appreciate your feedback, no matter what it is. Do keep it coming. Comment underneath the videos if you'd like, or email us if it's regarding the podcast at mc2photography.com. Let's move on to this.
It may be new. It may even be exciting. But does the world really need it?
All right, well, let's talk gear and stuff that aspires to be gear. The first item we've got here, Nick, what is this?
It's called the Belkin Stage Power Grip. So I know Belkin as a company, they probably make more than this, but they make power banks. These little units, big and small, that you...
Everyone gets one for Christmas every year.
Yeah, and you can use it to charge your phone, to charge your, I don't know, whatever you need to charge up. It's USB enabled, shall we say. So this is a MagSafe equipped battery pack, which charges a connected iPhones. It's only for iPhones, I believe, because it's MagSafe, which is...
What does MagSafe mean, Nick?
Basically, it's obviously inside the iPhone, and you can use it to charge devices. So it's like an invisible...
So is it like a cordless charging?
Yes, cordless charging. Thank you, that's invisible. Cordless charging.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it is invisible because you can't actually see it, I suppose.
Well, exactly. Yeah, but you've explained it better than me.
Yeah, thanks.
I think my iPhone has it. I don't use it for anything. So it's a MagSafe equipped battery pack which charges your connected iPhone, but also it provides a camera style grip as well. So basically, as I said, it connects to your iPhone via the MagSafe, which allows them to be charged, whilst also giving it, I'll call it a funky looking camera grip. And it also has an inbuilt shutter button to take photographs with, and also has an extra USB-C cable, so you can actually connect other devices as well at the same time. So you can connect another iPhone should you have two
The idea of this, I think, is it's got the kind of grips, kind of got
Yes.
a slightly fatter side to it, so you can attach your phone to it
Yeah.
wirelessly. It will charge the phone, and then you can walk around taking photos with it.
Yeah.
Obviously, you wouldn't want a cable trailing off and charging anything else up there.
Exactly.
But we mentioned a grip style thing last month, but it didn't do anything. You just attached it to it, and it had the wee grip. And we decided that you'd stick it on once, and that would be it, because you're not going to walk around with it in your pocket, basically. But do you think this is something that's actually useful? Because at least it charges.
Yes and no. I mean, it makes it bulkier, so it's not going to fit in your pocket. So I would say each time you want to use it, it's going to have to be outside of your pocket, unless you're walking around with a handbag or a backpack
And we
or
all know
something.
how heavy those battery packs are.
Yeah, I think the key here is to not think of it as a grip.
Yeah,
Think of
to
it as
more-
a power bank.
Yes.
And so if you were going to connect a normal power bank to your phone, you'd have to connect it with a little USB cable. And therefore
Yes.
you'd have two things, your phone and the power bank, connected by a cable rattling around, in your pocket. It'd be all awkward. This is still one item, albeit a bigger item, but it's one item with no cables. And so... and you've got the added bonus of it then doubling up as a camera grip and with a shutter button on top. So if you want to take photos, it's more convenient. I like it.
Now that you've put it like that, I mean, I have a power bank. Well, I have two. I have a smaller one, which I would use when I go out walking, whatever, just in case I need any power on my phone. It's probably about a similar size to that anyway. So, yeah, take back everything I just said about bulk.
My phone is getting to that age where a full charge doesn't quite last a day now.
Yeah.
And so if I'm out away from home for a long period of time, I often have to take a power bank with me.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's just, it's an extra thing to carry. It's extra bulk anyway. So if you're going to have to carry one, then why not make it one that fits to the back of the camera and doubles up as a grip? Because,
Yeah.
you're going to be carrying it anyway. So if you think of it as a power bank, which doubles up as a grip, then I think you can see the attraction in it more than if you think about it as a camera grip.
Yeah. With no price as yet. I think it was shown at CES, one of the world's biggest electronics show. I think it's in Vegas.
Something that is actually both of you would like, which is very unusual for this section of the programme, especially on this kind of side of the gear things. And it's just gone Christmas, sadly, guys. So,
Yes.
maybe by next December. All right. Well, this next thing, we were talking earlier on in the podcast, Nikon have got a contract, as it were, with NASA, and they've made a thermal blanket for the camera that's going up there. This thing is slightly similar, but I'm not sure if it's entirely moonproof. What is it, Marcus?
Yeah, so this is, I don't actually know is it PGY Tech? I don't know how you pronounce that. Is that how you say it, PGY Tech?
That's how I would call it that, yeah.
Or could you call it Piggy Tech? Whatever they're called, they've basically made a jacket, a down jacket for your camera and lens. You get those rainproof covers that you can put over your camera.
Uh-huh.
Think about that, but now it's padded so that it keeps the heat into the camera. Now, the one I'm looking at, it actually goes over what looks to be about a 300mm lens, so it's quite a long lens. Now, lenses don't generate heat. So
No.
What's the point of having a down covering to something that doesn't generate heat? Because down jackets only work on humans because we generate our own heat and it keeps that heat in. But if the camera's already cold, which it would be if you were outdoors anyway, then what heat are you keeping in? There is nothing to keep in. So I don't understand what the point is. I mean, you'd have to basically put the jacket on the camera when it was indoors and then go out and use it, and it would stay warm for maybe slightly longer than if you didn't have it on. I just don't really see the point. But it does come with its own storage pouch. So,
Wow.
I mean,
There you go. I'm in.
Exactly. No, I think it's totally pointless, this one, Ruth, I'm afraid.
All right, we don't reckon the world needs the cold-proof warm cover. What about this next thing? This caught my eye, as it would catch anybody's eye, I think. It's called the Wonder Petal Nature Camera. Nick, explain to us what this is.
So Wonder is the company, and they've called this product the Petal. It's a nature camera, which mimics a flower, so to speak, allowing you to get close-up shots of birds and insects, which are attracted to nectar.
So it's not a nature lens, it's a nature camera. When you say mimic, what do you mean? It looks like it?
Kind of, in a way. I mean, it doesn't. Although it's called the Petal, it's just like a round camera. It doesn't. It
looks like a toy, really. It looks like a child's toy.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look like a flower with petals on it. It's just a round camera. I think it comes in a couple of colours. So it's at the end of a flexible stem. So if you think of like a product called a Joby, which has those flexible legs on it.
Yeah, like a gorilla pod.
GorillaPod, thank you, Marcus. But it's just a thin stem, so you can wrap it around twigs. So say you've got bamboo canes holding up a flower, so you can wrap it to that and, have it sat next to the flower, so to speak. It has a 12 megapixel camera, which can record 4K video as well.
And how's the camera operated?
Yeah, so you basically get an accompanying phone app. And so this allows you to it allows you to see a live feed. So you can be sat in your house or whatever, so away from the insects, the birds, whatever you're trying to attract to this camera. So you get a live feed, and then you can use the app to take the photographs or record the videos. And where the AI bit comes into it, from what I get, it can provide information about the subjects which the camera detects.
Yeah, so it's educating you at the same time. So
yeah.
I mean, do we think this is going to overtake the nature photography with a macro lens? Is the advantage of this the fact that it's unobtrusive?
But this isn't macro, is it, Nick?
No, that's what I mean. So what's the advantage?
So there's company called Wonder. They make these other devices, like a bee hotel, terrarium, butterfly feeder. So it's like a whole ecosystem of products that they're building, that you can use this camera with and all their other devices. So yeah, I mean, does the world need it? Probably not. But I'm guessing it's going to be great for educating children,
That's what I was going to say. I that's the kind of thing that I would potentially buy my kids for a birthday present or Christmas present or something like that. But I would never, ever buy one for myself. But right at the beginning, when I first saw a picture of it, I said it looks like a toy. And that's exactly what I think it should be sold as, a toy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, check that out for yourself. It is fun looking, like Marcus said, and maybe something for kids to get them interested in, either wildlife or photography. But check those out in the show notes. Final item of gear that we have got for this month is something that we actually already have an iteration of that we use for photography online. Marcus, what's this final item?
Yeah, so this is the H&Y, they call it the RevoRing. And it's a variable neutral density filter and polarizer all in one. But the clever part is that it will fit to a number of different size lenses. So as you kind of turn the two rings on the outside of the lens, it has this kind of clever adaptable filter thread thing in the middle, which closes down. And then you put it on a lens, let go, and it will basically clamp itself to various different sizes of lenses. So if you've got, say, 3 lenses, you've got a 67mm, a 77mm, an 82mm lens, then you can buy one filter that will fit all of those 3 lenses. Now, I'm not going to deny that part of it is really quite innovative. However, having used the Mark 1 version of this, and this is the Mark II version that's just coming out, by the way, so that's why we're talking about it. The only difference between the Mark 1 and the Mark II version, from what I can tell, is that the Mark II version has locks on it, so that when you want to adjust the variable neutral density, and you're happy with it, you can actually lock it so that it doesn't get moved accidentally. And the same with the polarizer. But I've never had an issue with that at all. But what I will say is that because it's not physically screwed into the screw thread on the front of a lens, it's just being held with basically friction, spring-loaded friction. It is easy to knock it off. So if you move the tripod and you're on rocks, for example, and you put the tripod down quite heavily, the filter can fall off the front of the lens. Now, this happened to somebody else I know who had one. The filter hit the ground and it basically exploded because there's so many parts to this filter. It's basically like an aperture ring with all these blades that kind of close down to create the smaller filter thread. So this thing hit the floor, it exploded into a million parts, and there's no way that you're ever going to get that back together again. So they're quite fragile in terms of just basically make sure you don't drop it. But if you're only into photography and you don't shoot any video, then I would avoid variable neutral density filters full stop. Would you agree, Nick?
I would say yes, but I do sometimes say to customers, if they're on a limited budget and they want ND filters.
I've yet to find one that creates an even density across the whole frame. So this one that we're talking about has a particular problem where when you go above 6 stops, because the variable ND will go from 1.5 to 10 stops, but when you go above 6 stops, you get this very obvious kind of dark cross. So you get a line from corner to corner and then off the opposite corner to the opposite corner. So it makes a dark cross across the frame, which is more noticeable on wide angle lenses, and it's more noticeable when you're shooting at wide apertures as well. And it just means that you can't really use it at 7, 8, 9 stops anyway. So what's the point in having, just make it a 1 to 6 stop and forget the cross thing. I mean, there probably are focal lengths where you don't notice it as much. but they're not ones that I've ever used. So I just don't use it at anything more than 6 stops anyway. So it's got a limited appeal. But anyway, this thing costs £190, so it's not cheap. Or it'd be about $200 US dollars, and same in euros, I guess. But the whole point of this, the whole selling point of it, apart from the innovative thread mount thing, is that if you don't want to carry around several neutral density filters and a polarizer, then you can just get this one thing and you've got it all in one filter. However, what amused me when I was researching this is that on the RevoRing website, or the H&Y website, they actually fully acknowledge that the X is a problem. So their solution is that you add more neutral densities to the front of it magnetically. So if you want to do, say, 10 stops, rather than put the ring all the way around and get the dark X, you put it to 6 stops and then add another 4-stop neutral density to the front of it. And it's like, well, what are you talking about? This completely negates the whole advantage of having this variable ND, because if you're going to have to carry around other neutral densities to bolster this thing up, then why not just get a full set of neutral densities and be done with it?
It is something we've used for video, though, Marcus.
No, absolutely. For video, it's far more useful. That's why I said if anyone's thinking about this and they're just into photography, then I would say, or I would advise, not to get a variable neutral density ND. Just get a 3, 6 and a 10. And if you only want to get 2, then get a 3 and a 6, because you can double those up and it becomes a 9, which is very close to a 10 anyway. So that would be my advice for photography. But if you're into video, where you want to change it all the time because the light suddenly changes, you can't change your exposure time because that's set when you're recording video. You might not want to change your aperture either, because that will affect your depth of field. So it's easy just to change the neutral density on the front, and it's far more useful for video than it is for photography, that's for sure.
All right, so the 2nd generation RevoRing, if you're interested in that for video or for anything else, check out the link in the show notes. We are going to move on to our final feature for this month.
Retail regrets. It's only money.
This is a new feature we introduced last month, where you tell us about photography purchases you've made which have been mistakes. So maybe you bought a product which never lived up to what it promised, or maybe you bought something in a moment of madness that you've never ever used. Let us know your retailer regrets so that others don't make the same mistakes. We last month started off by sharing a couple of our own purchases, namely a pancake lens. Marcus, have you used that in the in-between month since we recorded the last podcast?
No, and I don't see it coming off the shelf anytime soon.
Pancake Day is coming. It might be an interesting little... you could stick something on socials at least. But anyway, the pancake lens has not been used. Nick, before we hear from some of our listeners, do you have any retail regrets yourself?
Yes. Well, selling my Canon 500mm f4 lens when they did a lot more wildlife photography.
Was that the Mark 1?
The Mark II.
Because I've got the Mark 1. You can have that for a couple of grand if you want.
A couple of grand.
Is that massive thing that...
Yeah, it weighs a lot more than the Mark II does. Because on the occasions that I do wildlife, I think, I wish I still had that lens. I have a 100-400, but you can't beat a good prime lens for wildlife photography. In terms of purchases, I bought an 85mm 1.2 RF lens.
Nice lens.
Over £2,000. Yeah, nice lens, very nice lens. But what does a landscape photographer want an 85mm 1.2 lens for? I did my first wedding shoot last year. I took along a 50mm and a 70-200 and the 85. I had 2 camera bodies. One had the 50mm, one had the 70-200 on it. I never used the 85 because I just used the 70-200 from the same spot. Rather than having to move backwards and forwards, I just stayed in the same position.
And so come on, how much does it cost?
I think it was just over £2,000.
Okay.
I think, probably about £2,000.
And how many photos have you taken on it that you've actually got a use for?
20, 30, yes.
So, Nick, think of it like this way. So the lens cost you just over £2,000. You've taken 20 photos on it, okay? So that's 10... Is that 10? No, it's £100 per photo, isn't it?
It is.
Okay. I've got a ultra large format camera where people say, I can't believe that every time you take a photo on that, it costs you £25. you're 4 times more, and you're digital. Come on.
I know.
You could make a fortune, Nick. These prints are worth a base level £100 beyond anything else. Well, we asked you guys to tell us some of your retail regrets as well. This is from Leica Guy. He says, listening from Arizona. First, I think the new quiz segment is fun. Thank you. I'd like that to be regular. As for the item I most regret buying, I'll say it was a flash unit. Over the years, I have seen some interesting work done with outdoor fill flash and then purchased a small unit to give it a go. I ultimately tried it a few times, then the flash goes in a drawer, never to be seen again. I've gone through this scenario a number of times over the years with the same result. Keep up the good work. Flash units, I'm the same. I have a flash. I think I have 2 flashes, even with one of those nice soft boxesy things on top, because for the same reason I've seen outdoor portraits taken with fill flash and thought, yeah, that's perfect. That's what I need. It's sitting in a drawer. I don't think I've once used it.
You haven't actually used it?
I don't think I have.
Do you know that how many years has Photography Online been going? 5 years?
Yes.
And we've never, ever done a feature about flash because...
But we should.
It's such a bad way of taking photos. I mean, if you're in a studio, fair enough, but that's not really what we do. We've never done any studio work. But if you're out and about, just use the light that's available to you. You use reflectors. It's far easier. And you get a far better effect.
We could do a feature comparing using fill-in flash on a flash gun and reflectors.
The problem is that, we always tell people never ever photograph with the sun behind you because you're looking at your subject from the same angle it's being lit from, and therefore you don't get any shadows. As soon as you put a flash on your camera, that's exactly where you've put your light source. Your light source is hitting your subject from exactly the same angle that you're photographing it from. And so you never get a flattering light unless you use off-camera flash, which then becomes a whole nother ordeal outdoors because you need...
You could get a flattering light from a flash unit with a little softener on top of it. Absolutely, you can.
No, but you really want side light. We're talking about portraits here, right? Because you're not going to be using flash on a landscape, okay?
No, you're not.
But you could be using flash for, say, macro or close-up work or for portraits, and you really want side light or even backlight on those subjects. You never want front light on it, really.
But people can be very creative outdoors with flash, and I see lots of portraits in places like California, LA, places really bright, middle of the day, and they still use flash to take the photographs, and it has a really, really interesting look.
And do you know what? Every time I see one, it's so obvious, and I just move on because.
But it's supposed to be obvious. It's a whole look. I like that personally. I would buy a book of that kind of photography because it's its own thing.
I know exactly the style you mean.
I know if you've got a reflector it's got more natural results. You need a second person with you to use that as well, which not everybody has.
Yeah, you do. But to use flash properly, you need a second person, or you need a stand.
If you're off to the side.
And then you need to start setting up wireless triggers and all of that nonsense. It just becomes so much of a faff. You just think, I can't be bothered.
Well, yes, each to their own. Anyway, Leica Guy does not use his one, and I got to say, nor do I. Stuart got in touch. Stuart Neville, he says, my retail regret wasn't a high-spec camera, lens or accessory, but a simple point and shoot. It was the ghastly... haven't heard that word for a while. The Kodak Printomatic. When the Printomatic was first announced, he said, I loved the idea. It looked like a fun camera. Loved the name, loved the look, the idea of saving the pictures onto an SD card as well as instant prints. As soon as the first picture came out of the camera, though, I knew this purchase was a mistake, and this camera was a piece of rubbish, trading on the once proud Kodak name. Every picture has a horrible purple cast. Indoor pictures, outdoor pictures, colour, black and white, they're all the same. Thinking the problem might be the Zodak zinc paper/film. I ordered the Polaroid brand. Pictures were just the same. Hideous. Stuart wasn't impressed.
Yeah, when you're in trouble when your black and white photos have a purple cast.
Purple. I mean, there's so many instant cameras. I've got a little Fuji Instax camera. It's fun to use. I enjoy using it. My nieces enjoy using it. It's just a fun thing to have. Polaroid, we've had stuff on the show. We've done instant prints from the Polaroids. I personally like an instant print. But as this guy, Stuart, was saying, Kodak, you expect more from the name. And do you think people are just not putting the relevant effort into these things because they're playing on people will buy it anyway? Yeah,
I'm not familiar with the camera, to be honest. So I can't really comment on it, but all I do know is that you can get some fantastic results from instant film. I've got an instant film back for one of my large format cameras, and I love using it.
I wonder if Stuart bought this because of the fact that it has the SD card capability as well as the instant prints.
Yeah, well, I can't remember what the name of it is now, but I bought my daughter a Fuji film camera for Christmas last year, and it does exactly the same thing. So it's a digital camera.
Yeah.
You can edit it on the actual camera itself and apply different effects. And when you're happy with the photo, you then press print, and it will print, an instant photo out, which is really good, because if you have a normal instant camera, you take a photo and then the print comes out and you wave it about for a minute, and then you look at it and find that someone's blinked, or someone's walked in front of the camera, or your finger was in front of the lens or something like that, and you've just wasted £1 because each time you press the shutter button it costs £1 in film. Whereas the good thing about this is that you can see the photo on the screen before you commit to printing it. So it sounds like it's a similar setup for this camera.
Great concept. Just need to sort out the execution on that. Anyway, thanks Stuart and Leica guys for getting in touch. If you've got retail regrets, we would love to hear them. Stick them in the comments, email us, whatever you'd like to do. We would love to hear from you. That's about it, I think, for the February podcast. Just letting you know what you can watch on this month's Photography Online show, which is up on YouTube. We are continuing the Great British Icons Challenge. The team setting off to shoot a lighthouse. Hopefully no Photoshop will be involved in this. I'm not overly amused that it was nearly involved last time, Marcus. I'm not sure I'm going to rate you on this by the end of the year. We're telling you how to sell your unused or unwanted gear, which is not a bad way to start the year
I should watch that.
Yeah, you should, Nick. Maybe you got some new gear over Christmas, you want to clear out some old stuff or whatever. Beginning of a new year, we'll give you some advice on that. And Marcus out again in the field with a big camera, surprise there, in analogue affairs. So that's all on February's Photography Online, which you can watch on YouTube right now. We are going to finish up there. Nick, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank
you. Marcus as well. Marcus needs to get in training for his lack of photography knowledge.
Yeah.
Maybe get some better trivia from him. Next time he's in, I think we've got James and Harry in next month. Not entirely sure, but it's going to be a blast anyway. So until then, take good care. But most of all, take good photos.
You've been listening to the Photography Online podcast in partnership with Kingjoy Tripods.